One night, a man was crying, Allah, 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 Allah. His lips grew sweet with the praising until a cynic said, "So, I have heard you calling out, but have you ever gotten any response?" The man had no answer for that. He quit praising and fell into a confused sleep where he dreamed he saw Hitter, the guide of souls, in a thick green foliage. Why did you stop praising? Why did you stop praising? Because I never heard anything back. This longing you express is the return message. The grief you cry out from draws you toward union. Your pure sadness that wants help is the secret cup. Listen to the moan of a dog for its master. That whining is the connection. There are love dogs no one knows the names of. Give your life to be one of them. A few short Rumi poems. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Out beyond judgment, out beyond all this dividing into clubs and political parties and arguing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. I'm told that Brad Pitt has that quatrain tattooed on his right bicep. Looks like I could get some money for that.
Or a pound of flesh.
What? Yeah. I just want to see it.
Huh?
Those are some long words. I don't know. Maybe someday I'll find out. I'll see that. Well, let's do a few more quatrains. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin reading the New York Times again. Take down a musical instrument. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. That was a radical thing to say in the 13th century. There are many ways to do it. There are many ways to pray. He says. Some Nasruddin, always they were to tell Nasruddin stories because laughter is certainly an important way to approach the mystery. Nasruddin, this is trickster figure in the Middle East. Nasruddin has his feet up on the altar, and the priest comes running in and says, "Nasruddin, this is a holy place. Take your feet down off the altar." He says, Where shall I put them? Nasruddin knows the importance of getting enough exercise. He said, my mother has been walking 5 miles a day since she was 60 years old. And now she's 90, and we have no idea where she is. Nasruddin eats a tuna fish sandwich every day for work. He takes one bite and says, yeah. And finally a co-worker says, Nasruddin, why don't you have your wife fix you a different kind of sandwich? He says, oh, my friend, it's not that simple. I make these for myself. I'm not married. Nasruddin buys a prize rooster and takes it home, and it begins servicing the hens in the barnyard and moves on to the ducks and the geese and sheep. And Nasruddin finally comes out and said, I did not pay such an exorbitant price for you to have you make a chaos of my farm. Besides, if you don't quit all this relentless sexual activity, you're going to kill yourself. Next day, he opens the window and the rooster is out in the barnyard, flat on his back, dead, and the buzzard is circling down. He says, he goes out to lecture the corpse one last time. I told you. The rooster opens one eye. He says, shh. When you're romancing a buzzard, you have to play it their way. That's good. I'll finish with just one little short poem of my own. He said, Benjamin, my son, said, show me the places you have loved, so I will know them like you have. I will have to do that someday, he said, when you're gone. The small things and places you have not told anyone of, show me those. I want your life inside my life.
I do have notes. I'd rather you changed my hair than the podium, Christopher. I wanted to mention we have such huge support here at the Arts Café. There's people that I will thank later, but to begin with, I need to thank a bunch of folks that I'm just learning how much they do for us as I step into Christy's shoes, as he stepped into Melanie Greenhouse's shoes. So we have huge support from Bank Square Books. And they do so much behind the scenes work for us, stuff that for me would keep me up for several nights on one night. So they make our work effortless. And Annie Philbrick isn't here tonight. She and Ben, who's on our board of directors, they're traveling. And Alyssa could not be here tonight. But I so want to thank the folks at Bank Square Books and encourage you to buy some books tonight. We have, normally, our book table's set up over there. We're out back tonight. We're going to have an intermission after the music. So it's a good idea to buy your books then and have them signed after, or at least nose around and see what we have there. And while I'm thanking people, I never knew how these CDs of me reading poetry at the Mystic Arts Cafe really happened. And they're a bit of a nightmare, you know, because you second guess yourself enough and then you watch the video. But one of the things that we have that's amazing is an archive of the readings that have happened here for the last 12 or 13 years. And it's a dedicated, I found out today, it's a dedicated service that the Groton Public Library provides for us. They provide us with the equipment. I picked it up today. I said, do we pay you for this? And he said, no, this is what we do. So in the Groton Public Library, they host like the local news station, and they do many, many, many community services, and one of them is for us. So we use their equipment for free. They take the films that Jim makes for us, and they edit them, and then they make sure that everybody signed the right paperwork, and they put them up so that people who want to see an event again can, or who many people tonight who couldn't make it or who couldn't get in can see them. So to Sean and Shane at the Groton Public Library, our huge and extensive thanks. And while I'm giving thanks, I really need to acknowledge the folks from this museum. And I don't know, I should know exactly how many years we've been here. Someone can tell me? Since the start? So we are 26 years in now with the Mystic Museum of Art hosting our events. And it's a beautiful backdrop. It's sure great space. They allowed us to put lighting in. The acoustics are amazing. And the other part of it is that we blast in and change things up and bring a different energy into the place. And for 26 years now, we've had this amazing partnership. And one of our intentions moving forward is to really sort of look at the way we might merge the poetry series with the art programming, in particular looking towards 2021. And Susan might talk to you a little bit more about that. But in terms of us looking at what the museum is planning for a year and having that help us figure out how to shape our own content and definitely shake it up a little bit.
Every summer they flock to the beaches and the docks. They got brown vinyl sandals, black nylon socks. They got a red peeling nose, synthetic clothes. And from June to September, now it's anything goes. Where's my flip-flop? And where's the gift shop? Are you feeling sad? And it's Winnebago, Winnebago. Clam cakes and chowder and stuffies to go. There's a slick on the bay, a band of Soleil. And Labor Day weekend just seems light years away. And I understand light years is a measure of distance, not time, but this is not a scientific song. They're out fishing for flats. They're wearing new NASCAR hats. They got a rented Boston Whaler. They got a cooler stashed in back. They took it out for a spin. Got kind of tanked up on gin. Now they're stuck hard aground till the tide comes back in. And there'll be gridlock at the town dock. Now are you feeling sad? 'Cause it's Winnebago, Winnebago. It's a long rainy weekend and you got no place to go. You know, there's a red tide today and a shark in the bay. And Labor Day weekend just seems light years away. You might notice that this is kind of a play on my favorite things from Sound of Music. Or you might not notice that. When the flea bites, the jellyfish stings, now are you feeling sad? Why not just watch a mobster eat a lobster? Are you feeling sad? They got sand in their eyes, they got a burn on their thighs. And that last tuna grinder, well, it's just covered with flies. There's a squid in the sink, and the cable's on the blink. Some kids left a bucket of crabs that's beginning to stink. This is a career achievement line, mark you well. Citronella, beach umbrella, are you feeling sad? And it's Winnebago, Winnebago. You know, there's no place to park, any place that you go. So let's just count license plates from contiguous states and hope after Labor Day that things will get straight. You know, one thing I don't get, you know, we're always wishing for what we'll never have, but sometimes I think I might like that reverential silence when you finish up a poem, you know. Probably never going to happen. As I said, I live up in Rhode Island, and I live amongst the Narragansetts, the tribe up there, and the Niantics. Down here you have the Pequots and the Mohegans. Further up the bay, there was a small and long-gone tribe called the Quonsets, and they were absorbed or shipped to the Indies, or who knows what happened to them. But interestingly enough, at the advent of the Second World War, they began to manufacture a structure which looked very much like the Wetu, which the tribal people in the East live in. So, this is a quick poem in honor of that structure. You know, it seems to me that your trailer homes, they mostly draw tornadoes, and your little shack down on the beach could float off in a hurricane-o. So keep your palm tree hut down at Sanibel or your igloo up at Nome. So I'm looking at a Quonset hut. Now there's a real well-rounded home. You know, you might not have an inkling at the onset, but you can make yourself a real good life in a plain old Quonset hut. No, I don't need some fancy spread from some architect's exotica. I just want the kind of place you can put up in Antarctica. And if it seems sometimes that the pace of life has gotten pretty hectic and you haven't been real comfortable since Dylan went electric, and if a cabin up in the piney woods gives you thorough heebie-jeebies, you might need the kind of place you can get surplus from the Seabees. You know, they build so flimsy anymore that your house could almost fold up. And you're better off with the kind of place that the weather can't get hold of. So just look around for a real short wife so your kids don't get too tall. And don't be surprised if all the pictures just kind of hang out from the wall. Now, you might not have an inkling at the onset, but you can't hear diddly when it rains down in a Quonset hut. And I know you think this piece of work is mostly nonsense, but you'll be galvanized when next you see the lowly Quonset hut.
It's great to be here. I love being with Coleman. I could hear Naz Ardeen's stories all night. And thank you, Lisa, for inviting me. And one thing I must say is that I wish I could continue to deliver pleasures of rhyme and meter that Joe Campbell did, but I am incapable of doing that. And as evidence, all you need to do is look at the title of my most recent book, which is called The Rain in Portugal, which is basically a trigger warning telling people they will find none of those end rhymes within. But let me just start by reading some poems, and it's great to have such a huge, wide audience here. When they say wide audience, that's amazing. And so here's a poem called Walking My 75-Year-Old Dog. I know we have a unreliable narrator problem immediately in that, but walking my 75-year-old dog. She's painfully slow, so I often have to stop and wait for her to study and sniff some roadside weeds, as if she were reading the biography of a famous dog. And she's not a pretty sight anymore, dragging one of her hind legs, her coat too matted to brush or comb, and a snout white as a marshmallow. We usually walk down a disused road that runs along the edge of a lake whose surface trembles in a high wind and is slow to ice over as the months grow cold. We don't walk very far before she sits down on her worn haunches and looks up at me with her rheumy eyes. Then it's time to carry her back to the car. Just thinking about the honesty in her eyes, I realized I should tell you that she's not really 75. She's 14. I guess I was trying to appeal to your sense of the bizarre, the curiosities of the sideshow. I mean, who really cares about another person's dog? Everything else I've said is true, except the part about her being 14. I mean, she's old, but not that old. And it's not nice to divulge the true age of a lady. Thank you. We're pretty far from Tennessee right now, but have you ever heard of the phenomenon of Tennessee fainting goats? Yeah, goats, not ghosts, but goats. And all I can say is that, well, you can see them doing their thing on YouTube, if that's what you would call what they do. All I can say is that they live up to all three parts of their name. And my response to hearing about them rather recently is a poem called Down on the Farm. Whenever the conversation turns to the subject of Tennessee fainting goats, the question that always comes up is why? Are they so squeamish that they faint like Victorian ladies whenever the farmer uses language unbecoming a gentleman? Or is it catching, one goat fainting because he sees another one fainting? But that still leaves open the question of what makes the first goat faint. Does the memory of having keeled over one morning make one keel over again? Are they in love, or is it all just too much? No one seems to know for sure, but it's something to think about when I'm trying to get to sleep at night, or when I'm looking out a window at the barn and the fenced-in pastures beyond. To see a goat stiffen before pitching over on its side with a thump is truly unnerving. But when he rises in a minute or two, as if from the dead, and goes back to munching with his head down in the sweet grass on these hillsides, then everything seems okay again, just like before. Now, so the only word, there's an odd word in this poem, and it's the word snood. Do you know what a snood is? It's sort of a woman's, usually woman's hairnet, I guess. Now adopted by some young hipster fellows in Brooklyn, I think, as far as I could see. But I think if they knew it was called a snood, they'd stop wearing it. At any rate, that's the only odd word. Let's see how to do this. It's called Safe Travels. Every time Gulliver travels into another chapter of Gulliver's Travels, I marvel out how well-traveled he is, despite his incurable gullibility. I don't enjoy traveling anymore because, for instance, I still don't know the difference between a bloke and a chap. And I'm embarrassed whenever I have to hold out a palm full of loose coins to a cashier as if I were feeding a pigeon in the park. Like Proust, I see only trouble in store if I leave my room, which is not lined with cork, only sheets of wallpaper featuring orange flowers and little green vines. Of course, anytime I want, I can travel in my imagination, but only as far as Toronto, where some graduate students with goatees and snoods are translating my poems into Canadian. Thank you. I have... Susanna and I are staying in an amazingly beautiful, tight little guest house. But I stay a lot in hotels in my travels, as most of these wandering bards do. So I have two fairly short poems about hotel life. And the first is called The Hotel Rex. Looming over the little sewing kit and the miniature bottles of shampoo and conditioner, I am a giant, a colossus, a king standing before the royal mirror in an enormous robe of terry cloth. As a sign of my benevolence, I will forego coffee, scrambled eggs and toast from room service, and check out early before my tiny subjects arrive to wash their hair and mend their simple attire. So try not to think about that. And this is a very, really tiny poem called Bad Hotel. Bad Hotel. I told the woman from housekeeping, who was eager to do my room, to just come in and pretend I'm not here, which is exactly what I had been doing ever since I checked in. I was looking at the big book of, it's not called the Big Book of Elizabeth Bishop, but it is the big collected poems. And on facing pages, she has two poems, one of which is called Sleeping on the Ceiling, and the other is called Sleeping Standing Up. So that was a kind of a marvel to see them together. And I thought I would do a much more conservative version called Sleeping on My Side. And it's a poem that kind of turns into a sonnet. It doesn't begin that way, but it turned out to be one. Sleeping on my side. Every night, no matter where I am, when I lie down, I turn my back on half the world. At home, it's the East I ignore, with its theaters and silverware, as I face the adventurous West. But when I'm out on the road in some hotel's room 213 or 402, I could be pointed anywhere, yet I hardly care as long as you are there, facing the other way, so we are defended in all degrees, and my left ear is pressing down as if listening for hoofbeats in the ground. And this is a poem called Me First. It's a speculation on the question, who goes first? I'll say no more. Me first. We often fly in the sky together, and we're always okay. There's our luggage now, waiting for us on the carousel. And we drive lots of places in all manner of hectic traffic, yet here we are, pulling in the driveway again. So many opportunities to die together, but no meteor has struck our house. No tornado has lifted us into its funnel. The odds say, then, that one of us will go before the other, like heading off into a heavy snowstorm, leaving the other one behind to stand in the kitchen or lie on the bed under the fan. So why not let me, the older one, go first? I don't want to see you everywhere as I wait for the snow to stop before setting out with a crooked stick calling your name. And this is a poem called I Am Not Italian. I am not Italian. I am not Italian, technically speaking, yet here I am leaning on a zinc bar in Perugia on a sunny weekday morning, my foot up on the iron railing, just like the other men who, it must be said, are officially and wholly Italian. It is 8:40, and they are off to work, some in offices, others sweeping the streets, while I am off to a museum or a church to see paintings, maybe light a candle in an alcove. Yet here we all are in our suits and work shirts, joined in the brotherhood of espresso. Or how is it said? La fratellanza dell'espresso, draining our little white cups with a quick flourish of the wrist, each of us tasting the same sweetness of life, if you take a little sugar, and the bitterness of its brevity, whether you choose to take sugar or not. I wouldn't be here if I were Italian, I don't think, so. Well, this might be good for the environment we're in. It's called Whale Day. Whale Day. Today I was awakened by strong coffee and the awareness that the earth is busy with whales, even though we can't see any, unless we have embarked on a whale watch, which would be disappointing if we still couldn't see any. I can see the steam rising from my yellow cup, furniture scattered about, and even some light, early light, filtering through the palms. Meanwhile, thousands of whales are cruising along at various speeds under the seas, crisscrossing one another, slaloming in and out of the Gulf Stream, some with their calves traveling alongside, such big blunt heads they have. So is it too much to ask that one day a year be set aside for keeping in mind while we step onto a bus, consume a ham sandwich, or stoop to pick up a coin from the sidewalk, the multitude of these mammoth creatures coasting between the continents, some for the fun of it, others purposeful in their journey, all concealed under the sea, unless somewhere one breaks the surface with an astonishing upheaval of water, and all the people in yellow slickers rush to one side of the boat to point and shout and wonder how they're going to tell their friends about the day they saw a whale. And a little poem, a little two-stanza poem called The Garland. The Garland. I would like to be laid to rest in a long tomb topped by the stone figure of an angel who appears to have landed there in order to sob forevermore, her face buried in her bent arm, one folded wing hanging by her side. Then, whenever I found the time to visit my own grave, after approaching with slow, respectful steps, I would place around her rough neck a garland of wildflowers that I knitted, then run back to the car, laughing and immortal. So that solves the mortality problem there. Let's see. Well, I'll read a couple of poems from this, as I said, this new book that fails to rhyme, The Rain in Portugal. And here's a poem, let's see, a little poem called 1960. Uh, 1960. In the old joke, the marriage counselor tells the couple who never talks anymore to go to a jazz club, because at a jazz club, everybody talks during the bass solo. But of course, no one starts talking just because of a bass solo, or any other solo for that matter. The quieter bass solo just reveals the people in the club who have been talking all along, the same ones you can hear on some well-known recordings. Bill Evans, for example, who is opening a new door into the piano while some guy chats up his date at one of the little tables in the back. I have listened to that album so many times, I can anticipate the moment of his drunken laugh, as if it were a strange note in the tune. And so, anonymous man, you have become part of my listening, your romance, a romance lost in the past, and a reminder somehow that each member of that trio has died since then, and maybe so have you, and sadly, maybe she. If I'm an only child, I'm not sure there's a special section here for the only children. There usually is. I usually have a line if there's a book signing, and if you're an only child, there'll be a special line, and an express line, because you deserve it, don't you? So here's my handling of that situation, called Only Child. I never wished for a sibling, boy or girl, center of the universe. I had the back of my parents' car all to myself. I could look out one window, then slide over to the other window without any quibbling over territorial rights. And whenever I played a game on the floor of my bedroom, it was always my turn. Not until my parents entered their 90s did I long for a sister, a nurse I named Mary, who worked in a hospital 5 minutes away from their house, and who would drop everything, even a thermometer, whenever I called. Be there in a jiff and on my way were two of her favorite expressions. And now that the parents are dead, I wish I could meet Mary for coffee every now and then at that Italian place with the blue awning, where we would sit and reminisce even on rainy days. I would gaze into her green eyes and see my parents, my mother looking out of Mary's right eye, and my father staring out of her left, which would remind me of what an odd duck I was as a child, a little prince and a loner, who would break off from his gang of friends on a Saturday and find a hedge to hide behind. And I would tell Mary all about that too, and never embarrass her by asking about her non-existence. And maybe we would have another espresso and a pastry, and I would always pay the bill and walk her home. I don't know, most of us studied T.S. Eliot in school, rather unavoidably, so here's a little response. But is a short poem called A Note to J. Alfred Prufrock. I just dared to eat a peach, a really big peach, ripe as it could be, and I have on a pair of plaid shorts and a blue T-shirt with a hole in it, and little rivers of juice are now running down my chin and wrist and dripping onto the pool deck. What is your problem, man? Little irreverence there. Well, that was a great idea to have everyone call out your dog's name. I might steal that and extend it to canaries and cats if you don't have a dog. But I did notice that in calling all the dogs' names, not one dog showed up. So you really need to train your dogs better. So here are a couple of poems about dogs, or poems by dogs. So this is a just 12-line poem called. It's a poem in which we listen overhear a dog's thinking, his ruminations. And what he's thinking about now is, and there are so many books now on how dogs think and how they feel. It's right next to putting girl on the cover of a novel, Gone Girl or Lost Girl, and also if you put a dog and a girl on the cover of your novel, this leads to tremendous sales. But the dog here is thinking about his relationship to his owner, and it's called A Dog on His Master. As young as I look, I am growing older faster than he. 7-to-1 is the ratio they tend to say. Whatever the number, I will pass him one day and take the lead, the way I do on our walks in the woods. And if this ever manages to cross his mind, it would be the sweetest shadow I have ever cast on snow or grass. I promise you your dog is not that sensitive. But, and here's, I can't promise you that this is the last dog, but it might well be. And this is a poem in which a dog is also in charge, and it's called The Revenant. It's really the ghost of a dog. The Revenant. I am the dog you put to sleep, as you like to call the needle of oblivion. Come back to tell you this simple thing: I never liked you. When I licked your face, I thought of biting off your nose. When I watched you toweling yourself dry, I wanted to leap and unman you with a snap. I resented the way you moved, your lack of animal grace, the way you would sit in a chair to eat, a napkin in your lap, a knife in your hand. I would have run away, but I was too weak. A trick you taught me while I was learning to sit and heel, and greatest of insults, shake hands without a hand. I admit the sight of the leash would excite me, but only because it meant I was about to smell things you had never touched. You do not want to believe this, but I have no reason to lie. I hated the car, hated the rubber toys, disliked your friends, and worse, your relatives. The jingling of my tags drove me mad. You always scratched me in the wrong place. All I wanted from you was food and fresh water in my metal bowls. While you slept, I watched you breathe as the moon rose in the sky. It took all of my strength not to raise my head and howl. Now I am free of the collar, free of the yellow raincoat, monogrammed sweater, the absurdity of your lawn. And that is all you need to know about this place, except what you already supposed and are glad it did not happen sooner, that everyone here can read and write, the dogs in poetry, the cats and all the others in prose. Here are hardly anybody reads a book of poems from beginning to end, starts in the beginning. Usually, I think most people, well, if you're like me, you treat it more like one of those flip books that you used to see, the cowboy with a lasso or something. And I'm usually looking for a short poem. I just want something quick to get a quick taste, and then maybe continue or maybe not. But so here are two. Let's see. Here are two very short poems. And I'm kind of collecting these short poems of mine, and I hope to get them in a book. And the title for the book is going to be Tom Thumb's Thumb. Okay. Really, really small. So the first short poem is called "Oh My God," and this is the best short poem I know is by W.S. Merwin. It's called "Elegy," and it's just a one-line poem, and the line is, "Who would I show it to?" So this poem is called "Oh My God" with an exclamation point. And you'll see that the speaker is very naive. Not only in church and nightly by their bedsides do young girls pray these days. Wherever they go, prayer is woven into their talk like a bright thread of awe. Even at the pedestrian mall, outbursts of praise spring unbidden from their glossy lips. And the other wee one is called, very important title, it's called Divorce. Divorce. Once 2 spoons in bed, now tined forks across a granite table, and the knives they have hired. Some laugh, some cry. Or I'll help. Read a couple more poems. This is a poem called, was written after a kind of a European little vacation was planned in the summer, and the plans had to be scratched. So we ended up spending the summer at home in the suburbs of, in Westchester County. And I wrote this poem to kind of console myself about that situation, and it's called Consolation. How agreeable not to be touring Italy this summer, wandering her cities and ascending her torrid hill towns. How much better to cruise these local familiar streets, fully grasping the meaning of every road sign and billboard, and all the sudden hand gestures of my compatriots. There are no abbeys here, no crumbling frescoes or famous domes, and there is no need to memorize a succession of kings or tour the dripping corners of a dungeon, no need to stand around a sarcophagus, see Napoleon's little bed on Elba, or view the bones of a saint under glass. How much better to command the simple precinct of home than be dwarfed by pillar, arch, and basilica? Why hide my head in phrase books and wrinkled maps? Why feed scenery into a hungry, one-eyed camera, eager to eat the world one monument at a time? Instead of slouching in a cafe, ignorant of the word for ice, I will head down to the coffee shop and to the waitress known as Dot. I will slide into the flow of the morning paper, all language barriers down, rivers of idiom running freely, eggs over easy on the way. And after breakfast, I will not have to find someone willing to photograph me with my arm around the owner. I will not puzzle over the bill or record in a journal what I had to eat and how the sun came in the window. It is enough to climb back into the car as if it were the great car of English itself, and sounding my loud vernacular horn, speed off down a road that will never lead to Rome, not even Bologna. Okay, so I think I'll read one more poem, and it's just great to be part of this thing, and especially to see Coleman here and hear his familiar voice and that great sense of the Spirit being in all around us and immediate. This is a poem called Aristotle, and I'm following, it's not too serious, but I'm following the precepts of the Poetics, where Aristotle says that things come in beginning, middle, and end. We kind of take this for granted. We kind of swim in the chlorine of that idea every day, but it was very new to Plato. We're the first one to, I think, actually formulate it in those terms. So he gets very excited if you look at the Poetics. He really gets, maybe you'd say overly excited by discovering that by pronouncing that the middle comes just before the end and stuff like that. He spends a lot of time on the relationship among the three parts. Anyway, I'm just trying to write an organized poem. And it's called Aristotle. This is the beginning. Almost anything can happen here. This is where you find the creation of light, a fish wriggling onto land, the first word of Paradise Lost on an empty page. Think of an egg, the letter A, a woman ironing on a bare stage as the heavy curtain rises. This is the very beginning. The first-person narrator introduces himself, tells us about his lineage. The mezzo-soprano stands in the wings. Here the climbers are studying a map or pulling on their long woolen socks. This is early on, years before the ark, dawn. The profile of an animal is being smeared on the wall of a cave, and you have not yet learned to crawl. This is the opening, the gambit, a pawn moving forward an inch. This is your first night with her, your first night without her. This is the first part, where the wheels begin to turn, where the elevator begins its ascent before the doors lurch apart. This is the middle. Things have had time to get complicated, messy, really. Nothing is simple anymore. Cities have sprouted up along the rivers, teeming with people at cross purposes, a million schemes, a million wild looks. Disappointment unshoulders his knapsack here and pitches his ragged tent. This is the sticky part, where the plot congeals, where the action suddenly reverses or swerves off in an outrageous direction. Here the narrator devotes a long paragraph to why Miriam does not want Edward's child. Someone hides a letter under a pillow. Here the aria rises to a pitch, a song of betrayal salted with revenge, and the climbing party is stuck on a ledge halfway up the mountain. This is the bridge, the painful modulation. This is the thick of things. So much is crowded into the middle, the guitars of Spain, piles of ripe avocados, Russian uniforms, noisy parties, lakeside kisses, arguments heard through a wall, too much to name, too much to think about. And this is the end, the car running out of road, the river losing its name in an ocean, the long nose of the photographed horse touching the white electronic line. This is the colophon, the last elephant in the parade, the empty wheelchair, and pigeons floating down in the evening. Here the stage is littered with bodies. The narrator leads the characters back to their cells, and the climbers are in their graves. It is me hitting the period and you closing the book. It is Sylvia Plath in the kitchen and St. Clement with an anchor around his neck. This is the final bit, thinning away to nothing. This is the end, according to Aristotle, what we have all been waiting for, what everything comes down to, the destination we cannot help imagining, a streak of light in the sky, a hat on a peg, and outside the cabin, falling leaves. Thank you.
So here's to community and poetry and friendship. Say hello to somebody new before you leave. That's your assignment. That's the only thing you got to do.